Let's go! Kolbe Fields added to LSU's long list of transfers, and we need to figure out what Brian Kelly needs to do with these final 4 slots. And a programming note, no Thursday night live stream. I will be in LA for the big game, but there will be a film study dropped on the great Harold Perkins. I've been asked a ton about doing one of those, and well, there you go. So, obviously, with 4 slots remaining, we need to understand a few things. The first is that, yes, Kolbe Fields is an absolutely huge pickup for LSU, but this is a guy who still has 4 years of eligibility remaining. So, even if he's not an immediate contributor, Kolbe Fields is looking at this as a long-term play for him, moving back home to play for LSU. What the Tigers are potentially looking for at this point, though, are immediate contributors. We do have a few names that we are going to give you today that we think can help out LSU. Now, the first thing we need to do is talk about the positions where there will likely be no more transfers. And on the offensive side of the ball, I believe wide receiver is so deep of a room right now that you won't see any more transfer portal wide receivers. The same could be said about running back, where LSU has already added a transfer in Noah Cain, John Emery is coming back, and of course LSU has other young options at that position. In fact, 3 scholarship running backs, a 4th if you include Josh Williams, that is already in the room. And then another position I think you will see no more transfers is the linebacker position. Kolbe Fields, Wes Weeks coming in from the portal, Demario Tolan also coming in, and then of course Harold Perkins, depending on his position. We'll talk about that in the film study on Thursday, but Micah Baskerville returns, Mike Jones returns, so this is a pretty loaded room, especially if you consider Xavier Carter as a traditional linebacker as well. So now we have to focus on the positions where LSU is really, really thin, and we're going to give you some players for those positions as well. Starting off here with defensive back, Ohio State's Sevyn Banks has entered the transfer portal. This is a former 3-star defensive back who exceeded expectations at Ohio State, but keep in mind, Ohio State's defensive coordinator decided to leave. He actually got demoted, and now he is in the transfer portal, Sevyn Banks. I know he was interested in the NFL, but he did have an injury. He decided to come back, and then he has also now decided to enter the transfer portal. Very experienced player, but once again, the likelihood of LSU landing him is very slim because once again, LSU also has a loaded defensive back room via the transfer portal with 4 DB transfers already. Now, LSU's defensive back room isn't the absolute deepest, but now with all the transfers, even though there's not many proven LSU commodities there, it is still a congested room. Boom! I'm looking at you right now. Okay, we got a big player we're about to talk about. But before we do that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It goes a long way for us to get to 10,000 subscribers, and also like this video. But most importantly, share this with someone else you know is a die-hard LSU football fan as we continue to grow the PHL community. Now, George Tacaks is probably a name that, and once again, I don't know if I'm saying his last name correctly because this is so new to all of us, but he is a guy that plays a position that is really, really thin for LSU, and that is tight end. Now, of course, LSU has Cole Taylor entering year 3. Hopefully, it'll be better than what he has shown in year 1 and year 2. Jack Mashburn also comes back after performing really admirably as a blocking tight end, and LSU also brings in Mason Taylor, but it goes without saying that this is the thinnest room of them all, especially if you view Jack Besh as more of a receiver moving forward. Now, Tacaks has played a lot in Brian Kelly's system, and you're looking obviously at a Rivals report on George entering the transfer portal, and it just makes too much sense for him to come to LSU and play his final year of eligibility, where there are a ton of tight end snaps to go around. Now, Why would George be transferring as a fifth-year senior? Well, it's because Notre Dame has Michael Mayer, who is a ridiculously good tight end for the Fighting Irish. So there is more playing time and the ability just to play somewhere else for your final fifth year. So I really do expect this to happen for LSU, especially after missing out on Danny Lewis. So, yes, you could be really high on Mason Taylor, but is he ready to play year one? We don't know. We know for sure George could give LSU some good blocking snaps and potentially some receiving snaps and some receptions and big plays as a pass catcher as well. And you bring in someone that knows what Brian Kelly wants out of his offense. So I really do expect this to happen. Now, there are other tight ends that are in the transfer portal, Jalen Lay out of Clemson, but this is the guy that you should expect to get with the Tigers. And what's interesting about that is it would still leave LSU with 3 open slots remaining. Now we get to the fun part, the offensive line. LSU has 3 final slots, and I do think they'll try to address the offensive line. So let me give you 3 quick names here. Tyler Steen out of Vanderbilt is the highest-rated offensive lineman in the portal. St. Thomas Aquinas, obviously there's some St. Thomas Aquinas influence on the LSU offensive line already with Marcus Dumerville and Marlon Martinez, but we'll see. Once again, it's kind of a long shot. If you're the highest-rated offensive lineman in the portal, everyone is trying to hit you up right now. So let's hope that happens. There's also an offensive lineman by the name of Chris. His last name begins with an A. I don't know how to pronounce it. He is from Tennessee. He's a Tennessee Volunteer, initially from IMG Academy as well. So maybe that is something else LSU could try to explore. And there also is some IMG influence on the LSU offensive line in Charles Turner. Now, we get to a name that is really spicy because his name isn't even in the transfer portal yet. And I say yet, it might not even ever get to this point, but Zeke Correll is a center with a lot of playing experience at Notre Dame. Now, I got to shout out a few people I trust when it comes to offensive linemen. Obviously, Blake at Are You Serious? A lot of you on the live streams, including my good friend Danny. She is always pestering me about talking about centers because LSU center play has not been that great, and Danny's been really passionate about it. So let's really go outside the box. And I was talking with someone who I trust a lot, Simon Guillory, about the offensive line, and he brought up Zeke Correll's name. He is a guy that has played a lot of snaps for Notre Dame on the offensive line interior, and he has experience at center. Now, as far as how the offensive line is going to actually line up next season, we don't really know. Obviously, you'll see Charles Turner. He has played some offensive line for LSU. I could also see an experimentation with moving someone to center. Maybe it's Tremont Shorts. Maybe it's Garrett Dellinger. Maybe it's someone else. We don't know. I know Blake is high on Dellinger potentially being the center. But what we know about Zeke Correll is that he has actually played center at the highest level, and he could immediately start right away for LSU. And, Simon is someone who's actually watched quite a bit of Notre Dame's games, and he thinks Zeke would start right away for LSU. So this is a very interesting name because his name isn't in the transfer portal yet, but kind of like George Tacaks, he is not a for sure starter. And that's the thing. If you come to LSU, there are snaps to be had at tight end and at center. So if Zeke comes over, don't you think Brian Kelly would want a center, one of the most important maestros of your offense? When you think Brian Kelly would want one of his guys snapping the ball every single play, especially considering it was such an inconsistent position for LSU over the past couple of seasons? I think he would. And I could easily see something like this happening. Now, once again, if Zeke is guaranteed the starter's job at Notre Dame, he is not going to come over. But what's really fascinating is he does have 3 years of eligibility remaining. Boom! Now, before I give you this last little nugget right here about the quarterback position, I have been getting a lot of questions about how you should invest into LSU football cards. Now, as many of you know, when you buy my merch, I actually give out a bunch of LSU cards that are in my collection. And look, you're seeing all these big Joe Burrow purchases that are happening now. So what we're going to do is on the Tuesday night live stream, I'm going to, set aside a little block for us to talk about trading cards, and any questions or anything that you guys might have, I'll be happy to answer it. Now, obviously comment down below your thoughts on today's video involving the transfer portal, as you guys are looking at a photo of Myles Brennan, and I know a lot of you are really worried about his health, and you feel LSU needs to go into the portal and get another quarterback. The issue is when there are 3 quarterbacks, all of which who are 4 stars or better, all of which have really high potential, and Myles Brennan has proven he could play at the highest level, it's just hard for a quarterback to leave another situation where they weren't playing and go into another situation where it's going to be really hard for them to see the field. Once again, quarterback is a very black and white thing, right? It's either you play or you don't. This is not defensive line where you rotate in or wide receiver. It's just pretty straightforward. You either play or you don't. There's just no other way I can put it. Now, I will give you one name that would kind of make sense, and it's not JT Daniels. Guys, JT Daniels will not come to LSU unless Myles Brennan gets hurt in the spring, and he is guaranteed the absolute starter's job to come on over. Now, this name is not going to be popular. It's not going to be someone that's going to set your heads on fire, but it is none other than Justin Rogers, who is Terrace Marshall's quarterback at Parkway High School in Shreveport. Now, Justin Rogers went on to pick TCU over LSU, but what really set his career back was a gruesome leg injury he suffered his senior year at Parkway High School in Shreveport, and he's never really been the same since. So he goes to TCU, he barely plays, then he goes to UNLV and gets beaten out by a true freshman after a somewhat rocky start. So if LSU absolutely, positively, desperately wanted to get a 4th quarterback, this would be a Louisiana prospect that you could take a flyer on, and maybe he finally lives up to his potential for the home state school. Once again, it's highly unlikely. Justin Rogers probably wants to go somewhere where he's for sure going to play, but once again, I get this all the time. You feel as if LSU absolutely needs to go get another quarterback. I'm just telling you, it's very hard out there right now to get another quarterback. And once again, if Justin Rogers couldn't cut it at UNLV, what makes you think he's going to cut it at LSU? So you're kind of in this weird point where if you think LSU needs to go get another quarterback, and there is a good quarterback that's out there, they don't want to come to a situation where they aren't going to play. The same thing is true vice versa. If you go out and get a quarterback who was not successful just for the sake of getting a backup quarterback, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. It just doesn't, because you're taking up reps in practice and there really is no future set in sight, especially if you expect Garrett Nussmeier or Walker Howard to be your guy in year 2. So it's kind of in the hands of Myles Brennan's health at this point, and we'll see if something actually happens in the spring. But as of right now, Myles Brennan is more than likely going to be your guy heading into next season. And for those of you that want to get another quarterback from the transfer portal, it is highly unlikely. But I could be wrong. Once again, and I'm not for going to get Justin Rogers, but that's the thing. You start stretching yourself if you feel you need to get a number 4 quarterback or just a 4th guy to have in a room just in case someone gets hurt. Now, once again, share all your thoughts in the comment section. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! So, down below, you can check out our Harold Perkins film study link. Yes, it is premiering on Thursday, but you can reserve you can set a reminder for the film study that's happening on Thursday. And tonight, we are doing pork chops. Let's